The richest man in Manhattan starts his day at 4 a.m., not in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park, not in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, but in the basement of a building, mopping floors that most people wouldn't even look down at. His name is Marcus Thompson, and his story will change everything you think you know about success, failure, and the power of keeping your mouth shut. Marcus Thompson's hands were cracked and calloused as he gripped the mop handle at 4:17 a.m. on what would become the most important Tuesday of his life. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the empty lobby of Sterling Financial Tower, casting harsh shadows across the marble floors he'd been cleaning for the past 8 years. But here's the secret that nobody knew, not his supervisor Janet, who treated him like he was invisible, not his co-workers, who barely acknowledged his existence, not even his own daughter Sarah, who was ashamed to tell her college friends what her father did for a living. Marcus Thompson wasn't just the knight, janitor of Sterling Financial Tower. He owned it, the entire 42-story building, worth $847 million. And today was the day he was finally going to tell the world. Let me take you back to where this incredible journey began, because Marcus's story starts in a place that would break most people's spirits forever. It all was 1987, and 23-year-old Marcus was standing in the unemployment line in Detroit, holding his newborn daughter Sarah in one arm and a foreclosure notice in the other. His wife Rebecca had left him 3 months earlier, unable to handle the pressure of their crumbling world. The auto plant where he'd worked since graduating high school had just shut down permanently, taking with it not just his job, but the jobs of 3,000 other men and women who thought they had security. The man behind him in line was crying. The woman in front of him was on the phone, desperately calling relatives, begging for money to keep her lights on. And Marcus? Marcus was doing math in his head. $47 in his checking account. Rent due in 6 days, baby formula. That would last maybe 3 more days if he stretched it. Most people in that moment would have focused on survival, getting any job, any paycheck. But Marcus was different. As he stood there, surrounded by desperation, he noticed something that everyone else missed. The unemployment office was in a building that was falling apart, paint peeling off the walls, carpet stained and torn, windows so dirty you could barely see through them. And yet, this building was packed. Every single day, hundreds of people came through these doors, desperate, with nowhere else to go. That's when it hit him. Real estate wasn't just about pretty buildings in nice neighborhoods. It was about necessity, about places people had to go, and if he could figure out how to own the places people needed to be, he'd never be unemployed again. But here's the thing about great ideas when you're broke. They stay ideas. Marcus didn't have money for a down payment on a house, let alone an office building. He didn't have credit, he didn't have connections. He had a baby, $47, and an idea that seemed impossible. So he did what most people would never even consider. He got a job as a night janitor. Not because he wanted to clean buildings, but because he wanted to study them. He wanted to understand how they worked, who owned them, how much money they made, what their expenses were, and most importantly, which ones were failing. Marcus's first job was at Riverside Community Center, cleaning offices from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. for $8 an hour. While everyone else went home, Marcus stayed. He didn't just mop floors and empty trash cans. He read every document he could find. Financial statements left on desks, lease agreements in filing cabinets, mortgage papers in unlocked drawers. He was building a database in his mind, learning the real estate business from the inside, one building at a time. His supervisor, an older man named Frank, thought Marcus was the hardest worker he'd ever seen. Always early, never complained, always went above and beyond. But Marcus wasn't being a model employee out of dedication to janitorial excellence. He was conducting research. By day, Marcus would go to the library with baby Sarah in her stroller, reading everything he could about real estate, finance, and business law. He learned about tax liens, foreclosure auctions, and distressed properties. He studied successful investors, but more importantly, he studied failed ones. He wanted to know every mistake that had ever been made, so he wouldn't make them himself. 3 months into his janitorial job, Marcus discovered something that would change his life forever. Riverside Community Center was 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The owner, a local businessman named Robert Hayes, was bleeding money and had no idea how to stop it. But Marcus did. He had watched the building for 3 months. He knew exactly why it was failing. The heating system was ancient and cost a fortune to run. Half the offices were empty because the rent was too high for what tenants were getting, and Hayes was paying for services he didn't need while ignoring maintenance issues that were driving tenants away. Here's where most people would have minded their own business. Marcus was just the janitor after all, but Marcus wasn't most people. He knocked on Hayes' office door at 6:30 a.m., just as the man was arriving for another day of stress and financial panic. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Marcus, the night janitor. I have some ideas that might help save your building." Hayes almost laughed. Almost. But he was desperate enough to listen to advice from anyone, even the guy who cleaned his toilets. Marcus laid out a complete business plan. Replace the heating system with something more efficient. Lower the rent by 20% to fill the empty offices. Cut 3 unnecessary services and redirect that money to fixing the cosmetic issues that were making the building look cheap. Hayes was stunned. This wasn't just good advice. This was better than anything his expensive consultants had suggested. "Marcus, how do you know all this?" "I pay attention, sir, and I care about this building like it's my own." Hayes implemented every single suggestion. Within 6 months, Riverside Community Center went from losing money to turning a profit. Hayes was so grateful that he offered Marcus a promotion to building manager. But Marcus had a different proposal. "Mr. Hayes, instead of paying me a salary, I'd like you to carry back a note for 10% ownership of this building. I'll continue managing it, and you can pay me from the profits." Hayes thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. He was getting an incredible manager essentially for free, and giving up only 10% of a building that was worthless 6 months ago. It was the easiest decision he'd ever made. That was Marcus's first piece of real estate. 10% of a small office building in Detroit, worth maybe $12,000. But Marcus was just getting started. He continued working as a janitor in other buildings, but now he had credibility. He had a track record. And most importantly, he had a strategy that nobody else was using. While other investors were competing for the best properties, Marcus was targeting the worst ones. Buildings that were failing, owners who were desperate, properties that everyone else thought were hopeless. Over the next 5 years, Marcus acquired pieces of 7 different buildings. Never more than 20 or 30% of any one property, but always with the same deal structure. He would turn the building around, increase its value, and get paid from the profits. His daughter Sarah was growing up thinking her dad was just a janitor who worked strange hours. She had no idea that her father was quietly building a real estate empire, one failing building at a time. By 1995, Marcus owned significant stakes in 17 properties across Detroit. But he was thinking bigger, much bigger. Detroit was recovering, but slowly. Marcus could see that the real opportunity was in cities that were already successful. Cities where the margins were thinner, but the potential returns were massive. Cities like New York. Marcus sold his Detroit holdings for $1.2 million and moved to Manhattan with 12-year-old Sarah. She was furious. She had friends in Detroit. She had a life there. And now her dad was dragging her to the most expensive city in America to work as a janitor again. What she didn't understand was that her dad wasn't moving to New York to clean buildings. He was moving there to own them. But New York was different. The stakes were higher, the competition was fiercer, and the people were a lot less willing to take advice from a guy with a mop. Marcus spent 2 years working nights and studying the Manhattan commercial real estate market. He learned that the principles were the same, but the scale was overwhelming. Buildings sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. The players were sophisticated and ruthless, and mistake could cost him everything he had built. That's when he found Sterling Financial Tower. It was 1997, and Sterling Financial Tower was the laughingstock of Manhattan real estate. A 42-story office building with a 50% vacancy rate, outdated systems, and an owner who was more interested in his yacht than his business. The owner, William Sterling III, had inherited the building from his father and was running it into the ground. He was losing money every month and facing foreclosure within the year. Marcus got hired as the night janitor and spent 6 months studying every aspect of the building. He talked to tenants who were leaving. He analyzed the lease agreements. He calculated exactly how much it would cost to modernize the systems and renovate the common areas. Most importantly, he figured out why tenants were leaving. It wasn't the location, which was prime. It wasn't the building structure, which was solid. It was management. Sterling treated his tenants like they should be grateful to rent space in his family's building, regardless of how poorly maintained it was. Marcus put together the most comprehensive business plan of his life. A complete transformation of Sterling Financial Tower that would cost $15 million and take 2 years to complete. But when finished, the building would be worth over $300 million. The problem was convincing Sterling to listen to him. Marcus tried the direct approach first. He requested a meeting with Sterling to discuss his ideas for improving the building. Sterling's assistant laughed at him. "The janitor wants a meeting with Mr. Sterling? That's hilarious." So Marcus tried a different approach. He started implementing small improvements on his own. He negotiated with suppliers to get discounts on cleaning supplies and used the savings to buy plants for the lobby. He rearranged furniture to make the common areas more welcoming. He even paid out of his own pocket to have the building's exterior pressure washed. Tenants started noticing. Some who had been planning to leave decided to renew their leases. The building started feeling more professional, more welcoming. Sterling noticed too, but he assumed his management company had finally started doing their job. That's when Marcus made his boldest move yet. He knew Sterling was desperate for cash. The building was 3 months behind on its mortgage, and foreclosure proceedings were starting. Marcus also knew that Sterling's pride would never allow him to take advice from a janitor. So Marcus created a fake identity. He borrowed money to rent a small office across town and hired an answering service. He created business cards and letterhead for Thompson Consulting Group, a real estate turnaround specialist. He bought expensive suits and had professional photos taken. Then he called Sterling's office and introduced himself as Marcus Thompson, a real estate consultant who specialized in saving distressed properties. Sterling agreed to meet with him immediately. Marcus walked into that meeting wearing a $3,000 suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and speaking with the confidence of someone who had transformed dozens of buildings, which technically he had. He presented his business plan with charts, graphs, and financial projections. He showed Sterling exactly how much money the building could make if managed properly. Sterling was impressed, more than impressed. He was desperate, and this consultant seemed to have all the answers. "Mr. Thompson, your plan is exactly what this building needs. What would it cost to hire you to implement it?" "Mr. Sterling, I don't work for fees. I work for equity. Give me 40% ownership of this building, and I'll guarantee that it will be profitable within 18 months. Sterling negotiated him down to 35%, thinking he was getting a bargain. Marcus walked out of that meeting owning more than a third of a Manhattan skyscraper. And Sterling had no idea that his new business partner was the same guy who mopped his floors every night. The transformation of Sterling Financial Tower took exactly 18 months, just as Marcus had promised. He modernized the elevators, upgraded the HVAC system, renovated the lobby, and completely changed how the building was managed. But most importantly, he changed how tenants were treated. Instead of an arrogant landlord who acted like he was doing them a favor, they now had a management team that actually cared about their success. Vacancy rates dropped from 50% to 12%. Rental rates increased by 30%. The building went from losing money to generating over $2 million in profit per year. Sterling was thrilled. He had no idea how Thompson Consulting Group had pulled off such a miracle, but he didn't care. His building was saved, and he was making more money than ever. Meanwhile, Marcus continued working as the night janitor. His daughter Sarah was now in high school and increasingly embarrassed by her father's job. Her classmates' parents were doctors, lawyers, investment bankers. Her dad cleaned office buildings. She had no idea that her father now owned 35% of one of Manhattan's most valuable office towers. Over the next several years, Marcus repeated this strategy with 4 more buildings. Always as the janitor, always studying from the inside, always approaching desperate owners as Thompson Consulting Group. By 2010, Marcus owned significant stakes in 5 Manhattan properties worth a combined $400 million. His net worth was over $140 million, and he was still mopping floors. Sarah was now in college, studying business, and still ashamed of her father's profession. She would tell people he worked in building maintenance and quickly change the subject. She had no idea that her father was one of the wealthiest men in New York City. That brings us back to that Tuesday morning in 2015, when Marcus was mopping the lobby of Sterling Financial Tower at 4:17 a.m., about to make a decision that would change everything. William Sterling III had died 6 months earlier, and his son William Sterling IV had inherited his share of the building. Unlike his father, Sterling IV was arrogant, entitled, and had no respect for anyone he considered beneath him. That morning, Sterling IV walked into the building at 4:30 a.m., earlier than usual, and found Marcus cleaning the lobby. "Hey, janitor," Sterling IV called out. "This floor looks terrible. What exactly do we pay you for?" Marcus looked up from his mop. He had been cleaning this floor perfectly for 18 years. It was immaculate. "I'm sorry, sir. Is there a specific area you'd like me to focus on?" "The whole thing. It's disgusting. You people need to understand that this is a professional building, not some ghetto cleanup job." Marcus felt something inside him snap. Not anger. Not hurt. Clarity. He had spent 28 years building an empire while pretending to be invisible. He had made hundreds of millions of dollars for other people while they treated him like he didn't matter. He had let his own daughter grow up ashamed of him because he was protecting a secret that no longer needed protecting. Marcus set down his mop, pulled out his phone, and called his lawyer. "David, it's Marcus. I want you to call William Sterling IV and schedule a meeting for this afternoon. It's time." "Are you sure, Marcus? Once you do this, there's no going back." "I'm sure. Set it up." At 2 p.m. that afternoon, William Sterling IV walked into the conference room expecting to meet with some lawyer about building maintenance issues. Instead, he found Marcus Thompson, his night janitor, sitting at the head of the table in an expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers and accountants. "What is this? Why is the janitor in here?" Marcus's lawyer, David Chen, opened a folder and slid documents across the table. "Mr. Sterling, meet Marcus Thompson, your business partner and the majority owner of Sterling Financial Tower." Sterling IV's face went white as he read the documents. Property records, financial statements, loan agreements, all showing that Marcus Thompson owned 65% of the building. "This is impossible. The building is owned by Thompson Consulting Group." "Thompson Consulting Group is a subsidiary of Thompson Holdings. which is owned by Marcus Thompson, the man you've been calling Janitor for the past 6 months. The room was silent except for the sound of Sterling IV's world crashing down around him. You've been the janitor. You've been cleaning my building for years. I've been cleaning my building, Marcus corrected. And I've been doing a good job. Marcus explained how he had acquired his ownership stake, how he had transformed the building, and how his management had made Sterling's family millions of dollars over the years. Why? Sterling IV asked. Why did you keep working as a janitor? Because I wanted to understand every aspect of my investment. I wanted to know what happened in this building when the owners weren't around. I wanted to make sure my tenants were being treated well and my property was being maintained properly. And, frankly, I enjoyed the work. But there was another reason Marcus had kept his secret for so long. A reason he didn't share in that conference room. He had been protecting his daughter. Marcus knew that if Sarah found out he was wealthy, it would change everything about how she saw the world. He wanted her to develop her own work ethic, her own values, her own relationship with money. He wanted her to succeed because of who she was, not because of who her father was. Sarah was now 28 years old, working as a financial analyst in Chicago, and Marcus decided it was time to tell her the truth. He flew to Chicago that weekend and took her to dinner at her favorite restaurant. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about my work. She sighed. Dad, if this is about you finally getting a promotion to day shift, I'm happy for you, but I own the buildings, Sarah, all of them. I'm not just a janitor, I'm a real estate investor worth over $400 million. Sarah stared at her father for a full minute before speaking. That's not funny, Dad. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her his investment portfolio, property records, bank statements, financial reports. Sarah started crying, not tears, of joy, tears of anger. You let me grow up ashamed of you. You let me work 3 jobs to pay for college. You let me struggle and stress about money while you were worth hundreds of millions of dollars.